So you're playing Genshin, you're doing some 10 pulls, and you get 5-star Mavuika. Now, what do you get with Mavuika besides the newest, or one of the newest Natlan characters? Well, Mavuika is a claymore-wielding Pyro user, and this is actually going to be the first video of 2025. So happy New Year's to everybody that is watching, that has watched my content, liked all of my stuff, and followed me. If you're not following, go ahead and follow. I have not said that a lot in 2024, so I'm going to try and say it more in 2025. I hope it doesn't get too annoying. And we're going to start off with Mavuika, mainly because I'm going to be doing my pulls for Sitlali on the 24-hour stream on the 4th. So I want to use my Sitlali for that video, not the trial one, which is what I use for Mavuika in this one. Now, before we get into like how her normal attacks and stuff work, we are going to talk a little bit about her Night Souls burst and a couple of other things in her kit. First off, if we use her skill, you have a tap and a hold. If you just hit tap, it is going to put this red ring around the back of your character, and it stays if you swap characters. If you tap E again, or you just hold it whenever you first used it, it is going to summon her bike. She will hop on her bike, she's going to ride around using her Night Souls point. Whenever you use her skill, she will fill her Night Souls gauge, and then you're going to deplete it through actions. With this bike, she does have a couple of overworld mechanics, right? She can ride on the ground, she can sprint, she can even, if you hold space down and kind of fly, she can even have like this glide effect on her as well. I'm not sure if there are any others, but those are the ones that I saw while doing this trial. Now, something else before we get to these enemies, once we start getting into the thick of it, you're going to see random electro damage. That is coming from Auroran, that is not coming from Mavuika, and there's no way to turn that off because I am using the trial character. So just keep that in mind whenever you start seeing a bunch of random electro damage. Now, we are going to talk more about this red ring and this bike in a little bit, but first we're going to look at her normal attacks. Now, her normal attacks are going to still do physical damage. Her charge attack does have a really long charge time, so make sure that you are watching out for that. It does have this cool animation though. Now, if we use her skill in combat, if we just tap E, it is going to do an instance of pyro damage in an AoE, as well as put that ring back up. Now, what this ring does is that it does intermittent pyro damage. If you swap from the character, you still get that intermittent pyro damage. You don't have to attack an enemy or anything like that. It will just deal pyro damage every so often. Now, if we tap E again or hold her skill to begin with and summon the bike, we are going to get pyro infusion into our normal attacks. Only the bike mode has the pyro infusion. If you take her back off the bike by hitting E again, you lose the pyro infusion. She goes back to doing physical damage with her normal attacks. Now this, her pyro infused on bike, normal, and charge attacks is where you're going to be getting a lot of your damage. I really like her charge attack though, because she kind of like drifts around in a circle, where I feel like that's where you're going to get a ton of damage from her, right? It's not a slow charge attack or anything like that. It's actually going to hit a pretty good amount of enemies whenever you're doing this. So I think that you're going to be using her charge attack a lot. Now, doing these actions using these pyro infused normal attacks does decrease your amount of Night Souls point. That's where you're kind of getting the pyro infusion from, is the Night Soul points. Now, obviously in that one, you do have the phlogiston, and in this trial, you do have more phlogiston or ease of access to it. So you can see that I'm just kind of drifting for a super, super long time. It's not going to quite be that easy in a normal game outside of either Natlan or outside of an area where we're getting extra Night Souls point or phlogiston. So now we're going to look at her burst. Her burst does not use energy like we are used to with other Genshin characters. This has its own system called Fighting Spirit points, and we have to build these up to then use her burst, but you only have to build it up 50% of the way to use her burst. Now, the way that you build these up is going to be from any party member consuming Night Soul points. So like Auroran in this team, doing that off-field electro damage is consuming Night Soul points, meaning that we are going to be building up the Fighting Spirit. You can also do it with Kachina, you can do it with Shieldin, you can do it with Kenneth, you can do it with Milani. Anybody consuming Night Soul points will charge up the Fighting Spirit. Another way is that anytime a party member uses a normal or charge attack, including Mavuika herself, it is going to build that up. Now, you can use it at 50%, and this is going to do an instance of AoE pyro damage, as well as giving her a little bit of Night Souls points, taking her into the bike mode, getting that pyro infusion. Now, even though we can use it at 50%, you do want to charge it up more than that because of one of her passives, where for every point of Fighting Spirit, whenever you use it, you will get a damage buff onto Mavuika. So if you fully charge it and you use it, you are getting the maximum amount from that talent. Something else is that after you use her burst, she also doesn't use up her own Night Souls points. So you can get a damage buff from charging it 100%, and then you will not be using Night Soul points, meaning that you can just keep that damage buff going longer because it lasts for 20 seconds, right? So this is a really, really good way to get a ton of damage through her. So it's almost like you're going to be getting everybody else set up, right? You're going to be getting, like in this instance, Kaya and Layla ready to do melts, going into her, using her burst, then using her skill to get that full amount of Night Souls points where she's not going to be losing any. And then you're just going to do damage and damage and damage and damage and damage until the effects wear off, and then swap back off and go through your rotation, right? You do want to, however, have another Natlan character in a party with Mavuika, at least one other, to increase the amount of fighting spirit points that you have, so that way you can use her burst more regularly. And because it doesn't use energy, I believe that you can completely ignore energy recharge on Mavuika because, again, she doesn't use the energy. It doesn't matter for her. She has this other mechanic, the fighting spirit mechanic, that you have to charge up independent of her energy. So you should just be able to completely disregard energy recharge on Mavuika. Now, her other passive is just that whenever a character uses a Night Souls burst, which is anybody in your party as long as you have a Natlan character, then it is going to give her an attack. And that's kind of it for her kit, right? Like, it's not simple, but it's not super intricate like some of the other kits that we've kind of had more recently. Now we are going to look at artifacts real quick, and we're going to look at the artifacts on this trial Mavuika. We are using Obsidian, which is going to be good because it's going to get up her crit rate a ton, and then it's also going to give her a damage buff in Night Souls form, right? Now for the main stats, they do have an attack, a pyro goblet, and a crit damage circlet, which I believe is going to be kind of the standard to go with for her build, because her entire kit scales with attack and pyro damage. Now for weapons, she of course does have her signature on here, which is really good. It gets up a little bit of crit rate, which you don't need a ton of though because of Obsidian, but it also increases crit damage and attack. Whenever you use your skill or your burst, you're going to get an attack buff, and then whenever you use a normal attack that is infused with an element, then it's going to give it another buff. And then if you're a Night Souls point, you can get it even higher, right? So of course this is going to be best for her. It is her signature. If you do not have her signature, then you can probably put to good use Wolf's Gravestone, which you can get off the standard banner if you lose a 50-50 if you've got one laying around. This should be a fairly good weapon for her to get her attack up. If you don't have something like Wolf's Gravestone, then you can use the Natlan craftable weapon. Is much better on like Kinich because you're getting elemental skill damage from him. You can use it on Mavuika. It's not going to be your best bet, but you can. Outside of that, you've got something like Serpent Spine, which is going to be good. You do have something like the Fontaine craftable weapon, Tidal Shadow, which is going to get up attack. And then once the wielder is healed, it's going to increase it even more. So if you do that, you just have to kind of make sure that you run a healer in your team to get that buff, right? It can be Sheila, it can be another healer that's not from Natlan, but you definitely have to run a healer in the team to get the full buff from that. But that should still be a pretty good option for her. Now that's going to be it for this video. Mavuika has red/yellow hair. I have blue hair, and I'll see you in the next one.